You don't laugh very much, do you? You don't have much to be lighthearted about, do you? You find it hard, do you not, to break down and be who you really are? Oh, what a pity. What a tragedy. That starting from our school days, while we laughed a little bit, the hard crust of false seriousness began to collect around us until the point came where we didn't know what to laugh at, or whether we should laugh at it, where we should be relaxed. Because when we were young, already the world started to confuse us, didn't it? I'll guarantee you something. You keep coming to talks like this, and you'll learn to laugh again. In your spirit, not at a joke. I'm talking about being lighthearted, about being free, of not being pressed down by the world, of not looking out the world and saying how threatening that is. How can I be lighthearted? You'll learn how. No one else is going to be lighthearted around you. No one else is going to laugh, because they're all enclosed in that dreadfully serious subject called the self. Truth will show you how to break out of yourself, so that when you come out to Boulder City and you sit during an hour-and-a-half meeting and you hear the most serious, profound things you ever heard in your life, because they're about the truth and about reality, in one split second, from utter right, healthy seriousness, you'll burst into a smile or a laugh. Because you've been melted down. Now something that needs to be melted down is hard, isn't it? A cold block of ice. Starting tonight and in the next 2 Thursday nights, you'll learn how to allow the warmth of light of truth to shine on you, literally, to come into your life. And you look around at the world and you wonder how anyone can ever live as you used to live, in the heavy dreadfulness of wondering whether you're going to make an extra $1 today or not. Who cares? Only your false self cares about that. All the competition, all the heaviness of wondering whether someone's going to steal your girlfriend or not, or steal your husband. Well, maybe someday you'll wish some girl would. Oh, how you'll change. Oh, how you'll be different. And you'll smile, and you'll be a pleasant person, because it's impossible for you to be anything else. Do you find it difficult now to be pleasant? How many of you find it hard to be pleasant? I can understand that. Carrying all those bricks around on your back isn't easy, is it? You're bent over. No wonder you can't be light. No wonder everything is taken as another challenge, and everyone is seen as someone who's going to add another brick on your back. We will show you how to break through completely. Starting about now. Oh, we already started, didn't we? Well, so many questions and so few answers. The question, maybe I've had the wrong answers all my life. The question, maybe I've been heading in the wrong direction. The question, is there something other than my mind which provides so many escapes which only get me deeper into the trap? All these questions. And you ask 1,000 authorities for the answers, and you get 1,000 answers. And you read all these books, right? You hear all these talks. And you see all these opportunities in the world. And somehow there's something, listen to this, there's something still alive in you that tells you that the answer is not where you are presently seeking it. The answer, starting tonight, as far as this class is concerned, let's start with an attitude, a deliberate, voluntary, wholehearted attitude that during the talk tonight, and during the questions later on, one thing will be dominant, and that is, listen to the beauty of a simple statement. One thing will be above all in our minds tonight, a wish to understand. Haven't we underestimated the simple power and the pleasure and the enlightenment of simply understanding something? Why do you think we have so much grief? Because we don't understand. We're in that room where we bump into four walls. You bump into one and you turn around and bump into the opposite one, and then the third and fourth one. I want you to know something as you're seated here tonight. I want you to know that the world has done pretty good work on you. Since you were a little girl, little boy, the world has succeeded quite a bit in making us all what we are here tonight in this room. And I want you to know that this part that is taking you away from your real self, from your real nature, this part is going to oppose any declaration you make to put understanding, insight, enlightenment before all else. You start right now to fight for yourself in the right way by saying, effective as of this very instant, I'm going to put understanding, a wish to grasp, to see, to comprehend. At whatever the cost, I'm going to put it first. Even if it disturbs me, which it will. 20, 30, 40, 50 years of conditioning are not going to surrender themselves easily tonight to anyone, whether you're here or out in the world. But I'm giving you a direction, a chance, an opportunity to deliberately say, please do it right now, that, look, for my sake, you're not being selfish when you say that. You're being very unselfish, because when you have gold, then you'll have gold to give to someone else. For my own sake, I'm going to put a wish to understand first and foremost and always. And if I catch anything coming into my emotions, into my mind, anywhere inside of me that tries to take that truly religious vow away from me, I'm going to refuse it. I'm going to reject it. Because I am sick and tired of being a slave to my own wild mind and feelings. And I'm tired of being scared of life. With that simple vow, with that right direction, listen to this startling statement. If you have done that, and if you will do it, the whole universe will back you up tonight. The whole universe of what is right, what is true, what is innocent, what is good, what is powerful, what is free. The whole universe will back you up. How's that for a partnership? And I'm telling you, it's the truth, not rhetoric. And you can discover it for yourself. There was one young student who made this vow to himself, a student of the higher life. And he said to himself, I'm tired of living the way I have been, and I'm going to put insight and understanding first in my life, regardless of what it might cost my old conditioning and my old habits, which are going to fight to keep me enslaved. I'm going to put understanding first. And he did, and he made progress. So this student was eager to know more. So he went to a teacher who knew a few things, a lot of things. And he said to the teacher, his teacher, he said, I'm ready to increase my understanding, my insight into life, into psychology, into the spiritual world. Will you please give me a special method for doing it? And the teacher said, fine, yes, I'll give it to you, but I hope you understand a certain spiritual law. And that law is you have to give something up in order to get something better. You must abandon the lower in order to get the higher. So you're going to have to give something up for me to give you this special method. So the student agreed, all right, whatever it is, I don't know, but tell me what it is and I'll go along with it. Because more than anything else, I don't want to be the old me anymore. I want a new spirit inside of me of which I have the bare glimpse. So the teacher said, fine, we have an agreement. Now here's what I want you to do for your part of it. I want you to come to me every day for 30 days. Every day I want you to come to me and I want you to tell me about a certain wrong attitude that you have discovered in yourself that you're willing to sacrifice, that you're willing simply to give up. We have to make room, you know. You have space, psychic space. We have to get rid of the junk before we can put the jewels in there. So I want you to come to me every day and tell me one thing for 30 days what you'll give up. And the student gulped a little bit because already his old nature began to attack. The old nature began to say, don't tell people what you're really like, what you're hiding. You'll be ashamed. But he knew enough, he had been a diligent student enough to recognize the dark force when it tried to tempt him to not carry out his part of the bargain. So he said, fine, and he went away. First day he came back, he said, all right, teacher, here's the first thing I want to admit. Bring it out into the open. I want you to know that I have been pretending that I'm not pretending. She said, that's pretty good. Not bad. Very good. Come back tomorrow. Tell me another one. So the student went back, came back the next day, and he said, I've discovered something else. It gets worse as I go along. The teacher said, fine, that means it's getting better as you go along. So the student said, I find that I've been hiding my need to appear important and impressive to other people. I put on a front, mask, fakery, you know, all the time, sort of appearing modest, not talking up too much, but all that's an act too. I really want to impress people. I even want to impress them that I'm the silent and strong type. I saw that, and I thank you, teacher, for giving me this opportunity to bring it out. Teacher said, fine. Come back the next day and give me your next one. Student went home and had a pretty difficult night because when he came back the next morning, he said to the teacher, well, you really make things tough, but thank you. Thank you so much for making it hard on me. I want to admit that I'm confused about sex matters. Sex is not understood by me. I'm ashamed of sex thoughts that I have, and I don't know what's going on up there and in my feelings, and I'm glad nobody else knows the sex thoughts I have. And in connection with that, as an added confession, which I finally saw for myself while pondering this, I finally saw that I'm afraid of women. Girls scare me. And all my life, ever since junior high school, when I became aware that girls were girls, I've been putting on a big fake act with them. I joke with them to cover up my nervousness. And I'd be the gallant hero now and then on the football field. I cannot thank you enough for putting me to this test where I begin to see exactly where I am inwardly. Went on for the next 27 days. And the teacher finally said, after the end of it, he'd brought out many, many more things. By the way, how would you like to do that for yourself? Would that be difficult for you? Would it be embarrassing? You can do that with yourself. Do you understand that you're both your own teacher and your own student? You can do that at home. You can start tomorrow if you want. And you'll make great progress to bring things up from the unconscious to where you can see yourself as you are instead of as you imagine you are. Other people don't see you as you see yourself. You understand that? This is why your enemies can be of great aid to you in you understanding what is actually going on inside of you. Student said, now, teacher, I think, have I not earned the secret method, the advanced method? Teacher said, yes, you have. Forget the who and remember the where. And the student waited for the teacher to go on, and when the teacher did, the teacher simply repeated, forget the who and remember the where. And the student said, well, thank you very much, but you better explain, please. Which the teacher did, and which I now explain to you. Forget the who. Have you ever noticed how instantly and how fervently, when we get into trouble of any kind, we go to a who, to a human personality, and find someone to criticize, to blame? You ever notice that? You went to a who, you went to a human being in your mind and found an enemy, an antagonist, someone who's blocking you, someone who's doing bad things against you. That teacher was pretty smart. He knew what he was talking about. Look what we've discovered already, a major mistake we make in the path of happiness, authentic, lasting happiness, which is inner freedom. We always go to a who which is false because we falsely believe in the who of ourselves. You still think you're someone who has to protect yourself to get somewhere, to win an advantage, to be impressive, to impress the girls, gentlemen. And every time you go to a who, you out there, you create even further the illusion of the false who inside yourself. The two go together and you're never out of the trap. Have you ever stopped to think what a human being is? Now look, you look at a friend of yours and you see his face, you know his name, and you know his habits. You know that he likes this or that, he has a green shirt or whatever. You know a lot about him. That's surface personality, isn't it? Did you ever stop to think that a human being is a psychology? That he's a condition, that he's a state? A collection of numerous contradictory ideas that he doesn't understand and you don't understand. I wonder if you're following the point on this. If you think that person is real out there, it's because you think you're real in the wrong way. Therefore, you will never solve the problem because you are going outside of yourself. And the teacher said, remember the where. Forget the who, remember the where. Now, what does that mean? Where did I go wrong? Where did I forget that marvelous truth? I heard it just 3 minutes ago and I forgot it. Where am I going wrong inwardly? Where is my spiritual memory lax? Do you remember your aim, your vow of a few minutes ago, in which you were going to put your wish for understanding before all else? Did you remember that? Did you forget that just in the few minutes? Remember where you are right now. Do you know where you are right now? I asked you that earlier. Do you know where your hands are? Do you know whether your head is tilted this way or that way? Are you aware even of your physical body, of where it is? Or do you forget yourself? Do you get caught up in 1,000 exterior and interior distractions and you forget where you are. Therefore, you never know that expression that came over your face. Therefore, you can't study it. Therefore, you can't see that you were taken over by something internal, by the state that caused the expression on your face, which means you don't know yourself at all. Make a little simple experiment then right now. Know where you are. Go ahead. Physical awareness, visual awareness is an early and an important part of you becoming aware of yourself altogether. And then going outside of yourself, seeing that the all is one thing anyway, going outside of yourself and being aware of reality. That is, understanding its existence. All right, just look at yourself. You don't have to even turn your head unless you want to. But look and see where you are. Are you strained? Where is your mind? Are you talking to someone else mentally right now? Are you talking to yourself right now? What is going on inside you right now? Just take a look. I'll give you 5 seconds to see where you are and see what's going on inside of you. If you're an unhappy human being, well, how many would call yourself unhappy human beings? May I see that? How many would call yourself confused human beings? How many of you know everything about yourself? How many of you know everything about life? How many of you understand God? How easily are you upset? How easily are you knocked off the little hill you've climbed up onto? You know, you get that good news, and for a minute you were elated and you thought that was happiness, and you can't understand it. How can happiness go away? And it does go away because someone knocks you down off the little hill. Why do you call it happiness? That was simply an inner state of elation based on exterior condition. Happiness is an inner thing, a state in which you don't want a thing because you have everything. And what you have is your own awakened spirit. I'll ask you a question then. If you are unhappy, are you willing to enter the battle in order to arrive on the other side of it and be authentically happy? Not because you have something, but because you are someone. Not because of possessions, but because of being. Picture yourself standing in a unhappy city, unhappy town. Everybody's miserable. Well, I've just described any town in the world, have I not? Everybody's strained, rushing around, wanting more money, honking their horns at each other, slamming down the telephone angrily. Add to it as much as you want during your day just today. But off in the distance, here you're sitting in this unhappy town, and way off in the distance you see a happy place. Yeah, you can see it through a telescope. You can see the people there are free, they're walking around, they're not quarreling. They're just living, and living happily. But one thing. In between the unhappy land and the happy land, there's a battlefield with a war raging. Two armies out there fighting each other. And for you to pass from the sad land to the bright land, you have to pass right straight through the battlefield. There's no way to go around it. You had better stop trying to go around that battlefield. You're not going to make it. You're not going to hide out with your religious words. You're not going to hide out with all the books you've read. You're not going to hide out with your daydreams. There's no way to hide out. If you hide out, you always hide out in the sad land, and you are sad along with it. Suppose we have a hero or a heroine, spiritually speaking, and he sees the folly of ever trying to kid himself anymore by remaining in the happy land internally, you understand? He sees the folly of ever calling himself happy when he's really not. And he sees there's one thing left, and that is to enter the battle. Now I want to tell you something. If you will leave the sad land and enter the battle where all those shots are being shot and all those soldiers are running around with bayonets. If you enter it and you just keep walking, you'll make it to the other side. See, listen to me. Well, the one question that comes up, whether it is asked out loud or not, the one question that people ask is, look, you're talking about the spiritual journey, you're talking about changing ourselves inwardly. Where am I going to get the courage? Where am I going to get the strength? Where am I going to get the wisdom? I don't have any. I know I haven't, and I'm not going to lie about that anymore. I thought I had it, but I saw what a charlatan I was. I kidded myself. I'm not going to do that anymore. And you say, take the inner journey. I have no strength. I have no guidance. I am terrified. What do? You start to walk. How? God doesn't require you to have courage when you don't have courage. He doesn't require you to have persistence when you don't have persistence. He asks you to start walking. Right now. You can do it right now. Just start walking. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, that can prevent you from right now starting to walk right onto that battlefield, which I'll explain in a minute. Start walking and learning from it and coming out on the other side. If you do, I'll tell you what will happen to you. Oh, the wounds will be pretty dreadful at times. You'll be hurt. But I'll tell you something, and never forget what I'm going to tell you next. You'll get wounded, but there's no way you can ever be slain out on that battlefield. You're not alive living in the unhappy land with our own vanity and egotism and pretense that we already know what life is all about. You're going to have to stop lying to yourself. It's a painful thing, a terrible thing. And you'll continue to suffer if you lie to yourself. But back to the battlefield. When you take one step away from the unhappy land and take one step onto the battlefield, God goes with you. And you know what will happen? You will know it. And it won't be your imagination. It will be your spirit that will tell you that. And you'll understand why you're out there. You're out there not as a participant in the battle, but as someone who is passing through it. The battle is not yours. It's not even your battlefield. You are passing through it. You are passing through the raging emotions that you don't dare even tell yourself about. But when you get out there, you'll see them, and it will wound you at first because you identify with them, and you say, what a shameful, terrible hypocrite I am. You are not a hypocrite. You are nothing at all. And when you are nothing, you are everything. And that is not rhetoric. That is a fact. Like to reach the other side, I've told you how to do it. And I will tell you the truth will go with you every step of the way. One more point. You will never hear the voice of truth, of reality in the unhappy land. It is not there because it has not been invited. Listen to what I'm going to say. Right in the middle of the roaring of the cannons and the screaming of the soldiers as they charge, and the machine guns and the mortars, right in the middle of the noise of the battle, above it you will hear the voice of guidance, and it will not be heard anywhere else. Right in the middle of the battle of seeing yourself as you are, you will gain insight and understanding as to who you really are. And you're none of the things that you've called yourself up till now, none of the labels. Let me repeat that point. It's so beautiful. See, people who stay in the sad land haven't entered the battle. Therefore, they are still divided, and they live in delusions of living in the happy land. But you say one word and they get mad, right? They get fired and they hate the whole world. That's not happiness. Although some people, some very strange and foolish people, do call their happiness their pains. The minute you step foot onto the battlefield, You will hear the roar of it. You'll hear the objection of your own dark nature that doesn't want you to start traveling across to the bright land. You will hear it scream. You'll hear all those dark forces scream. That is the noise of the battle. They say, don't go, it's dangerous, you're going to get hurt. It is lying to you. And you listen to me, not to it. And you listen long enough and you'll know where that voice is coming from, and it's coming from way up there, and you'll hear it. You'll never be able to lose the sound of it above the sound of the battle. You'll hear it above the sound of the battle. And every step you take, you'll get closer to the light land over there, the happy land over there. And at a certain point in your traveling, a certain point becomes clear. And there'll be no stopping you evermore for the rest of your life. You'll continue to set yourself freer and freer and freer. At a certain point, you will understand why you were put here on earth. And you were put here on earth to develop into a different kind of a human being than you are now. To have a nature other than that which you were born with. Want to enter the battle with us? Want to come along? We're doing it 4 times a week out in Boulder City. And I'll tell you, it isn't easy. Well, you don't have it easy now. You have it very difficult. But if we make it consciously difficult for you, you will understand your difficulty. And at a certain point, you'll say, all right, I'm going. And things get worse? No, they weren't worse. You're seeing what they always were, which you'd covered up, which you'd hidden from yourself. Little by little, your eagerness to travel further and faster increases. And you spend the rest of your life traveling toward the light, and your feet becoming lighter and lighter in the step. You have at this point, at a certain point, understood what it means to have a life that is not in time. And when your life is not in time, it is everlasting life, and that is what you have won by being a brave or unbrave spiritual soldier passing through the battlefield. Please do confine your questions to inner life topics, any variety of them, and keep your questions short and clear, please. And if I don't hear them, Joe will translate for me in case someone way back there in my ear doesn't pick it up. Please raise your hand if you like and ask questions. Please.
Well, now, this is my first contact with you, though I have heard your name. Now, my question is, I've heard the name, the word mentioned throughout your discussion, and the mention of a spiritual soldier and God. What is your concept of God? I have...
Yeah, sure. No wonder you're having trouble understanding who God is when the intellect is trying to do it. Now let's look very close at this. How many religions are in the world, would you say? Thousands. Therefore, how many different gods are there to all these people who belong to these tens of thousands of religious organizations? And all of them claim that they alone know the true God, and to prove it, they'll murder each other, right? So all these godly people have the only God as their personal possession. Now, the simplest of sanity would tell you that that is insane. The mistake is, an individual comes into this world and he's accidentally falls in by birth or accident, falls into this religion or that one. Or he doesn't go to any church at all, but he's afraid. And so he says, well, maybe God, whoever he is, will help me. But with every human being, he creates God in his own intellect according to his own desires, his own fears, his own religious training. So everybody has a different God. Now, how can there be more than one God? Now, you are getting scared. I know you are. Because we're getting close to what you are going to have to stop doing. I know your mind. I know how you react to what I just said. And you're going to react stronger as I go on. Now, why does the individual born in this religion or that religion create a God out of his own mind in the first place? Because he wants to be himself. He wants to be the false person built out of his own intellect. And a false individual must have a false God in order to pray to God, to protect him. Do you know real religious people who are horrible? Do you know them? They can quote religious literature and all that. They believe in their intellect that they are believers in God. They believe in their mind that their God is real, but it's a creation of their own desperations, of their own fears. Oh, I hope there's a God, because after I die, he'll take me to heaven. I hope there is. Now you listen to what I'm going to tell you, and you'll set yourself free of that particular kind of madness. Your mind can never know God. This means that you, as your present, conditioned, invented, imaginary self can never know God, because you, falseness, creates a false God. When you disappear as an invented personality by seeing through it, by understanding that you're not the creation of your own mind, when you disappear, your false God disappears, and you know who God is, but not by thinking about it. Therefore, there's no one to protect. You don't have to protect your God against the other person's God. You're aware of what life is all about without the opposites. That is, there is no you and God. There is simply an understanding of the oneness of life. And you are certainly not God. Don't you see, when a person worships a God made out of his own fears and desperations, that he becomes very special himself, which is a very cunning form of egotism. People who call themselves children of God, who go around slaughtering other children of God. We had better see through the madness of false religion and get rid of that. Then you will know who God is, but it will be a knowing not coming from you, but coming from way up there, which is inside your system, which you understand perfectly. Now, if you want to understand thoroughly and personally what I have just talked about, you know what you have to do. You have to begin giving up yourself in the sense that you are an invented self, made up of all your experiences, of all you're going to get in the future. Look, all you need is an understanding of life. You don't need to be you. Listen to me. Being you is what is making a wreck of your existence here on earth. Sense that. Go beyond the sensing and understanding. And when you finally understand what it means to give up your life in order to find life, you will have true life. You have to give up your life in order to find it. You've heard that elsewhere, haven't you? And that's true. That's a fact. Give up your false life in order to find true life. It has to be done personally and experimentally. And someday you may come back to this lecture out at Boulder City, and you'll just sit there and you'll nod, because you have gone from the beginning of the battlefield way through to the other side. And you have found what is new, authentically new.
I'd like to know how long it takes to get to the other side.
Would you like it to be 6 weeks?
I would appreciate it.
Let me answer your question this way. Do you want the greatest fun of your life? You come along on this spiritual adventure that many of us are on, you come out from your little closet, and the question of time, how long it takes, will have no meaning to you because you're having so much fun getting rid of your misery. Also, and I gave you a brief indication of it in the talk itself, you live in time, we live in time. I have to look at the watch to know what time to stop the meeting and all that. We understand that. Our social self, physical self, lives in time. The spirit does not live in time. So while you look at the clock to be in a certain place at a certain time, your spirit that is dwelling inside of you because you've gone way across the battlefield, it is timeless. It is living in eternity right now as you are living in that physical body. Don't you know that eternity exists now? That there's no clocks in heaven, in authentic heaven? I don't like to use that word. It gets too religiously wrong sometimes. But it is a synonym of a different kind of place. There is no time at all. And here you are living in a body that does live in time, but your spirit doesn't. Then how can, listen carefully to this, if you're living in eternity right now, as you're living in this world in a physical body, how can you ever again be afraid of death? You have already died. You've died to the illusion of a time self. You've died to the illusion that you are you. Then where's your anxiety over making more money? Or your worry over losing someone or losing something? You have eternity, and that is everything. Find it for yourself. And you'll give a nod of your head sometime when I repeat that sometime. You'll understand. Please.
You say you refer to the clock because it's socially convenient to get you to a place at a certain time. Isn't it possible that some of us deal with money in the same way and aren't really anxious about it at all? Generally what I'm asking is, you're probably not anxious. Isn't it possible that some of us aren't anxious either?
I'm sorry, get me that in.
He said, you say that you're not anxious. Is it possible that some of the people in the audience are not also anxious?
Well, let's find out. How many of you are completely free of anxiety? Raise your hand high. Completely free of anxiety. One man says he is completely free of anxiety. Two, a lady with him. Okay.
I say I'm as concerned as you are about the clock.
Pardon?
For time. I say I'm as concerned as you are about the clock as far as to get to some place on time. I'm as concerned as you are about money, but it's socially an accepted means of exchange, but I honestly am not conscious of an anxiety.
Do you suppose you could be anxious and not be aware of it? Do you think that's a possibility?
As much as yourself, I'm sure.
Look into it. A lady over here, I believe. Did I see a lady? Yes, please.
I agree.
Oh, all right. Yeah, anyway, please.
It's been about 7 years since I first came to this class, and when I first came, I had the same opinion that this man had, that I was in control of my life. I knew how to make a living, and when I came up to the class, I didn't realize what my life was like. And I realized that if I have the answers to life, I have no need to seek. I'm complete. I'm not out seeking. If I'm seeking, then there's something missing in my life, which I didn't understand that until I came to the class.
Don't be afraid to admit that you're afraid. If you are afraid and deny it and put on a phony front and go home and get mad and tremble and all that, if you're really afraid, you have made it impossible for reality to take away your fear. Now, you remember I dropped in a line earlier during the talk, and I'll repeat it again. We have to stop lying to ourselves. Now, how many will agree that that's a healthy statement? Would you agree to stop lying to ourselves is a healthy? All right. Now, here's why. If you are afraid, this means that you're afraid to see something in you that contradicts your flattering self-image of not being afraid. If you are afraid, this means that you're afraid to see something in you that contradicts your flattering self-image of not being afraid. You go out in the world and we bluff and try to make people think that we're confident, that we've got it made and all that. And we're afraid that if we see our fear, that will contradict us, and then we'll say, well, who am I? One minute I'm this person who's brave, and next minute I'm this person who's afraid. So which one am I? And it confuses you. You want one identity. Let me tell you that you don't have two identities, most of you. You have about 1,000. And every step you take onto that battlefield, you're going to see another one. You're going to see, I'll give you an example, and I've watched it in this room tonight, by the way. I see it in a certain person. You're going to see that you have a phony casualness about you. And see, casualness, no. Why do you do that? Why don't you just simply see that you're scared and that you're nervous? That is called honesty, and that's the way to help. How can God help a person who refuses to accept help? You're on. Please. Yeah, John.
You said in your talk that if you put truth first, the whole universe will be behind you. Can you explain that a little better?
Well, isn't that nice? Yes. When you get the whole of your neurosis out of the way, what takes its place? Something that is real, something that is light. If you only knew who your real friend is, you take your own conditioned, acquired, nervous nature as not only your friend, but the only self you've got. This is why you resist the light and the power of the universe, because you're afraid if you give up your neurotic self that you won't know who you are, and you call that death. Of course it's death. This is what we're after, to die to death. Get it through your heads. You've made a terrible mistake in judgment. The whole object of life is to die to death. And if you refuse to die to it, then you will live in death, exist in death. If you die to death, you die to your false nature, and when that is gone, only one thing is left, and that indeed is the power of the universe. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, which you don't, if you don't understand, then you can if you'll get your mind out of the way. But all you have is a mind, so you say, I'm not going to give it up because I won't know what to do. I'll be stupid, as if you're not stupid now. Isn't it stupid to pretend that you're brave when you're not? Now look, when you go home tonight, if you came alone, watch your own thoughts when you go into the door, and maybe you live alone, you go to bed alone. Watch how lonely you feel. Or if you came with 2 or 3 other people, notice how you go somewhere and you talk about things. And just look in your conversation to see if you had any defensiveness in you toward what you've heard tonight. When you come here and you argue with what you've heard in this room, who do you think you're arguing with? You're certainly not arguing with me. I don't have to argue with you, because I know what I'm talking about. I know I'm telling you the truth. And if you argue, that's because you sense, you know that I know the truth, and you're resisting it because you take truth as being your enemy. Why don't you wake up? This is a chance you've got to break through. You go out of here and don't come back. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? I ask you, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Do you want it to go uphill or downhill? Now, I'm not talking about me personally or our classes. I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about truth. That is what you need. The classes can give you guidance in it. Please.
Do you believe that self-love is important, or do you believe that denial of self is important?
Say that again, please.
Do you believe that self-love...
No, may he say it, please. I'm sorry.
Do you think that self-love is important in this teaching, or denial of self-love is important?
Now look, when you use the word self-love, what are you loving? How many of you are lovable? Huh? Oh, well, how many of you are unlovable? How many of you don't know what in the world you are? There is no word on the face of this earth more hypocritically used than the word love. Forget it! Shall I tell you why? So that you can arrive at the state of love. You want the word or you want the state? The word is not the state, and you stop using it as a substitute. Look, please. Any hypocrite can go around saying, I love you. I love everybody. I love my enemies, as Christ taught. I love everybody. Catch that man off guard, and you'll see someone who's got hatred in him, not love. Beware of people who talk about love all the time. They're using words. If you really want love, that is, I'll define love for you, authentic love. Love is the absence of you. Now there it is. Love is the absence of you. Well, come on, honesty again. How many of you have no love at all in you, and you know it for a fact? All right. That is a beautiful start, and that's one step out on the battlefield. And when you get to the other side, you won't have any need for the word, because you will have the state. And you will never, ever again be able to hurt yourself as you are hurting yourself now. You'll never again be able to hurt any other human being as you hurt them now by being what you are. Look, it doesn't take a sarcastic comment to hurt another person necessarily. It doesn't take hitting them with your fist to hurt another person. Your very mood, your very nature, your very psychology can be disastrous to another human being, as in the case of adults toward children. How do you treat the people you're around? You treat them according to your actual spiritual level, and in no other way. Now, the question is, what is your actual spiritual level? If it's hurting the other person, it is injuring you. The injury goes both out and in equally. Now, if you're injuring yourself and you're nervous and you're tight, that means you have self-injury. That's the only thing you have to give to anyone else. When you set yourself free through this long, hard work we're talking about, you'll also set the other person free. And by the way, as an exercise, you can deliberately set another person free in 1,000 different ways. And this is a lecture in itself. You can stop making demands on them. You demand something of your wife or husband because it makes you feel secure. Why don't you be insecure and see what happens to you? Set them free, and every time you set them a little bit free, you set yourself free. And good night. Suppression. Suppression is a condition in which energy is confined in a space that is too much for its own pressure. Now, you know what suppression is in mechanical things. If you put air inside of a balloon and blow it up moderately, the suppression is not too bad, therefore the balloon doesn't break. If you blow it up too much pressure, its confinement is too much for it, and it bursts forth in an explosion. Put too much steam inside of a boiler and it will explode also. Pressure is a mechanical force. Suppression into pressure is a mechanical force that always must have an opposite. You can see this mechanically. I just explained it to you. It is suppressed, it's too much for it, it bursts forth and goes to the opposite. The air wants to be free of its confinement and go into the outer air where it is natural. So this is mechanical suppression, which can be served, can serve us if you watch it carefully and don't let it explode. And it is of no harm. Human beings are harmed by suppression because it is unnatural to human beings, except as they are still immature. Therefore, it's natural to their state, but not very desirable, is it? Would you call yourself suppressed? Pressures? You feel confined by yourself. You call it confined by life, but you don't understand that you're confined only by yourself. So we have a state of suppression, mechanically, and its opposite. Now, what is the opposite of psychological repression, confinement under pressure? Well, we're going to look at a very special form of it tonight. Very interesting, too, and you will see how practical it is as well as interesting. You ever in high school studied mythology? You know what mythology is? It's a anecdote, stories of characters who are exaggerated human beings. They have superpowers and they also have super weaknesses. Atlas holding the world up, or Achilles with the weakness of his heel, are all forms of human beings exaggerated in both their powers and their weaknesses. And incidentally, there was one character in mythology, I believe it was a son of Neptune, who could change his shape at will. He could appear to be anything he wanted to be, to amount people to believe he was physically. Change his shape, his form. Well, that's outer. Don't we do that ourselves inwardly? Don't you change your shape? Don't you change your features, your attitudes, the way you behave toward people at will? That is, when you think it will serve your best purposes. All right. Now, in mythology, there is a certain group of spirits which are called Furies. Ever hear of the Furies? All right, let's get a practical connection immediately. Furies, furious, right? Furies are wind spirits, spirits who have allied themselves with the wind, and furious winds, and they're vague, have vague features. We'd have to have the picture to see it. I'm trying to describe it with words, but they are evil, and they're usually female. And what they do is go around acting furiously, destroying, carrying people off. Now, where do you suppose the authors of books about furies and about their antics, where do you suppose they got the pattern for that? Simple to see, isn't it? But in writing the fable or the myth, they took human characteristics, exaggerated them, and turned the furies into great ghouls rushing around destructively. Furies, furious human beings, same thing, exactly the same thing. Forget mythology. That was a method of teaching, of understanding, of explaining through exaggeration and personification the idea that human beings themselves are furies. Been furious in the last week? Then mythology described your inner condition, didn't it? So, fury the furies, wrath, anger, is an opposite of suppression. If you are suppressed, you are furious. If you're furious, you're suppressed. And you're also mechanical and you're not conscious. The first thing we want to see as we're developing this and studying these opposites and what we are is to understand, and don't you think you understand it now, that the furies in us, they have no intelligence at all. How can being hateful be wise? When you burst out of your confinement and you want to strike back at the world and you get furious and you want to attack and carry people off and punish them, would you call that a reckless force or a wise action? You know what you'd cause it. So there's no intelligence in it, which explains why there's no intelligent action in this world at all. Haven't you been surprised at yourself sometime in coasting along fairly well through life, and a challenge comes along, something you have to make a decision on, and you do it, and afterward you wondered how you could have been so foolish, so impulsive, so reckless? What do you suppose carried you away? You know very well. The fact that the opposite had to explode at one time or another, and it did in that case, and you wondered at your utter lack of intelligence, you who thought you could handle the situation rationally. It's like a man who comes to a river and he wants to cross. Intelligent so far, he has a certain desire to get across the other side where it looks a little nicer over there. But he doesn't have a boat, but there's a big forest around, fallen trees. So he goes back in the forest and he gets a dozen logs and carries them down to the riverside. And he puts them in a pile and makes a bonfire and dances around it. And then when the fire dies down, the ashes are cold, he takes them and scatters them alongside the riverside, chanting about how beautiful it's going to be when he's on the other side. See, you have got to make connections with what I'm talking about. You've got to see that your life doesn't make any sense at all the way it is. That wasn't an exaggerated situation. How many times have you been told right here in this class that if you slow down, you can begin to understand your suppression, and you can begin to understand the opposite explosions which you always have, and you've been given that wood to make a raft with to cross a river, instead you burned it up and did a foolish little dance. The fact is, there are furious furies, and there are milder ones, smaller ones, which are constantly jumping up inside of that pressurized cabin called your mind and directing what you do and what you think, which means you are not living your life at all. Example. Have you been in a condition, well, you think, have you been in a condition where you feared non-action? Go slow on this now. You were with a group of people and they wanted to do a certain thing, and you feared not to go along with them, or in a conversation of some kind, you feared to remain silent. So you spoke up and you said something prompted by a mild fury inside of you, which you later regretted. The remarks, we all know those. That's why I repeat that. Those foolish things, and we hurt ourselves. why don't you ask sometime when that happens, who on earth said that? For 10 minutes I've been telling you who said that. It certainly wasn't you. For a moment you recovered your sanity and you looked out at that shocked face on the person you said that to, and you were ashamed, weren't you? You were embarrassed. How could I have ever said that or done that? It's happened to all of us many, many times. And I've explained why. Because you're still living mechanically, whereas the pressure and the release of the pressure. Up to this point, you've understood that a mechanical force unseen by you is doing something that you should be doing, which is speaking from yourself, thinking from yourself, and acting from yourself. Can't you look? Can't you just look inside of yourself and see that pressure and remember everything you've heard and then make your vow of disobedience? When you made that foolish action, you got involved with people who were just as foolish as you are. And you got involved in them. I will tell you what consented to it. And I'll tell you it wasn't you. It was your own ignorance of what life is all about, what you are all about. It was you thinking that there is going to be a reward for you in going out with those foolish people and doing those foolish things, or being by yourself and having all those foolish daydreams of conquest, of self-importance. How's it sound to you to hear me say to you now that you are taken over by a tribe of furies who have you fooled? I'll tell you what to do right now. The phrase is conscious disobedience. Conscious disobedience. Now look, part of your pressure, all that force inside you confined, has a good deal of resentment in it because you are thinking, and even unconscious of the thought I'm going to give you now, what is going to be the next demand? Who's demanding in the first place? Well, we've been talking about that. Something that's taken over your life. And you kind of sense, don't you, that you are not in control. And part of your pressure is even asking the question, what comes next? You know, we talk about going along with people and making them happy toward us by behaving the way they want us to behave and so on. And inside you are asking, whether it's husband or wife or friends or just you and the relationship to the whole world, your pressure is asking, what's going to be the next demand on me? And you don't like it at all, do you? You wouldn't have it. You wouldn't have that anger. Take another one. This is a good one. The fear of any kind of punishment tomorrow or next year. And all these furies inside of you make quite sure that they keep that alive. You are being acted on. Whenever you feel miserable of any kind, whenever you feel that pressure, when you feel that you're not in control, you are being acted upon. And I'll tell you what joins the furies. Ignorance. Because ignorance doesn't know real value, and therefore it says there is a thrill in attacking other people. And I told you earlier, There is no sense, there's no goodness, there is no intelligence in a blast. And the tire, overinflated tire bursting, would you call that an intelligent act in the form of a tire doing that? You'd say it was something that could wreck a person, which probably has. Mechanics are too close to a blowing up tire. So what do you think it would do to a human being? The very same thing. As the pressure builds up because you're not aware of all that we're talking about. And it blows up, and you even take pleasure in being furious. Someday we're going to have a whole series of talks just on the topic of enjoying sickness, and that is one of them. How are we going to get through to you then the fact that if you explode in any way at all to anyone at all, under any circumstances, whether it's visibly out there or invisible to yourself, that you're lost? That you're a person who is not found. You have not even found what you should do with all that energy, and what you should do with it instead of dividing it into suppression and blasting is to use it to be a conscious, awake, decent, normal, spiritually normal anyway, human being. Your victory, you might want to write the following down. Your victory is recognition without reaction. Recognition of what we're talking about, of all these spiritual truths. Recognition, listen to this, recognition without reaction. I see. We can move out of the fable book, which explains human nature, and get over into a spiritual book which explains higher nature, cosmic nature, reality's nature. Reality can look down and see the furious furies right inside yourself, can look down and recognize them and have no reaction at all. That's what that means. Can you start then, tonight, to catch a small fury? I told you they come in all shapes and sizes. Watch a small irritation. Remember what I said, and remember that if you weren't suppressed, repressed, compressed, then you wouldn't have been irritated in the first place. But you can stand aside from it, recognize it, and not react to it, because you have made the great spiritual separation from it. What you are doing, and this is also an unconscious act on your part, what you're doing, and something is going to have to shock you out of it, what you're doing is taking misery for granted. Taking cause and effect as necessary. And I told you can transcend those opposites. Now, to transcend the opposites of cause and effect means that you will have to give up being fearful of future punishment for anything you've ever done in the past. Why do you then cling to the furious thoughts, the painful thoughts, that you are going to be lacerated by someone you're not quite sure who's in charge of the place? But why do you think that someone is going to punish you tomorrow for some lapse or some ignorance or some psychological crime of today? Why does that thought, that assailing thought, that furious thought inhabit your psychic system at all? pseudo self-protection. You say to yourself, you scream in your fury, I want to live. And if you punish me, or if I'm even afraid of punishment, I will know that I exist. Without the attacks, without the explosions, how will I know that I exist? So welcome all the fear. Don't you understand how the whole world is furious with furies and has deceived you into thinking that you must suffer from them? You try deliberately sometime to say, okay, I am not going to worry anymore about anything, including punishment. You say sometime, okay, I'm going to drop it and let my mind be free. Never works, does it? In the first place, your thought, which is you, is saying that. And it means you haven't arrived at the point yet where you're willing to let reality live your life instead of you in your unreality live it. It means that you have still been deceived, and look, listen to this. You still think that being assailed by furies, by dark forces, is a good and necessary thing for you. And now here's where your responsibility or lack of it comes in. You refuse to see and to say that it is not necessary for me to worry about anything at all. I am telling you the truth. The fact that the furies will disappear when your ideas about yourself, which are false and therefore are suppressed, when they disappear. Then you'll know what it means to not have this life of your own, which is just lived for you casually. You have nothing, as I've told you before, you have nothing to look forward to. You don't have to look forward to anything, because you do have it already. Now look, let me stress a point. There is a great demand on you to not understand what we've talked about, to not see. A great demand, because the false spirits themselves, the furies, which are a part of human nature, as you know, they have occupied you for so long, they don't want to have to move to another address. And in almost every case in human beings, they don't. I want you to know that they're like the man who came to dinner. Do you remember that story? Man came for dinner and he hurt himself, so he had to stay there over a period of weeks and as the guest of the house. So the furies have made themselves at home, thank you, within your own system, and you tolerate it. Have you ever lived with someone and you could hardly wait to get out of there, get out of the place? I see some smiles. Well, wouldn't it be much nicer to get rid of an unwelcome guest inside yourself instead of that physical guest out there in the world? Well, what are you waiting for? Now look, you see, still believing in the furies, you still believe that they have power. The power of revenge. And you'd like to politely ask them to leave, but you're afraid of the expression on their faces. You know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you will one day. You're afraid to ask them to leave for fear they'll attack you. And they know that, and they've got you. Don't you understand how far you have drifted into unconscious living? Now you have a chance, because we don't have a meeting. I don't think we have a meeting in which we fail to mention that it is possible for you to begin to see that you live in pain. Now, if you live in pain, there is a cause of that pain. And the cause of that pain is a combination of ignorance and refusal. Your ignorance to go on your own. You're hearing a talk tonight. When are you going to give yourself a talk? Going into far more details than we can. And explain to yourself the idea of pressure, tension, because there are unconscious things inside you. And that is unnatural. If you brought them up so that you could see them, they can never go back again and cause pressure. Therefore, the Furies would lose their home, which is the whole object of what we're talking about. But think of refusal, the word refusal again. When you refuse to investigate and to kick them out, it's because you are very comfortable in your unhappiness. And you love to complain about it, and you love to moan about your lack of spiritual progress. Listen, how can I say it in a different way? Well, maybe the old way will do. There is life only in death. The suppression, the bursting out into furies are a part of death. An automobile tire has no life of its own. It's a mechanical force. Anyone can do anything it wants to it. You can blow it up, keep blowing it up until it bursts. It can be acted upon by an outside force. It has no intelligence at all. You can be acted upon by now by one small change in the face of someone that you want to approve you. They scowl and the pressure builds up because you are unconscious. You're living on the level of opposites of cause and effect. Understand this. To understand it, to welcome the understanding of it, is to expose the mechanical parts of you that you have taken as being conscious, that you have taken as being life. So the exposure of death, of mechanicalness, of no life, the exposure of that as no life brings consciousness, because exposure and unconsciousness are the same act. Being conscious of yourself, having been acted upon by the Furies, which was your present nature, being conscious of that is the beginning of life, is the beginning of the increase of life, and the beginning of the end of death in you, which is the same thing as saying that you transcend your mechanical parts, you transcend your own faults and wrong connection with them while still keeping the mechanical parts to serve their place here in life, physical life. The mechanical parts being memory to help you drive home. So your awareness, we come back to the awareness of the darkness, at first brings great discomfort to you. Now, who is being discomforted? I explained it about 5 minutes ago. The Furies who have been comfortable occupying your psychic system, that's been their home, and they don't want you to understand what you've heard here tonight, because they want to continue to occupy you so they can live their life through you. And since their nature is one of hardness and inconsideration and cruelty, since that is their nature, they must express that nature through you, which means you are living unnaturally, which means you are in pain, but you're none of the whole business at all in reality. One bit of understanding that has entered you tonight regarding what we have talked about is not a part of either the compressed boiler or the exploding boiler that mindlessly and recklessly spews out and hurts anyone in its track. The one bit of light which understands that begins to cancel out both sides equally. Have any of you noticed that in your inner work? That as that inner suppression and pain, what am I going to do? What's it all about? Haven't you noticed that the ending of the suppression, even just a little bit, also ends your false need to blow up in anger? It has to. When look, a boiler that has no pressure, and how can it blow up? See, no pressure, no opportunity, no chance at all, no need to blow up. Have you understood some of it then tonight, what we've talked about? You can increase it for yourself. As I said, you give yourself a few talks on these things. And remember the prevalence of Furies inside you, and then study them in other people, and watch how the Furies themselves have this capacity to change their shape, to try to appear what they know the other person wants them to be. And you'll never be tricked anymore, because you're not tricking yourself anymore through ignorance. Now listen to this. If you want, you can drop your precious, furious irritation right now. If you want, you can drop your fear of displeasing any other person on earth. You can drop it right now. Who said you needed suffering? You tell me who said so. The only entity that said so is your own suffering. And you believe that, which is saying you falsely believe in your false self. It means you have chosen a life of suffering, of anxiety, of fear of the future. This is the decision you have made for your life up till now. Now is the time to change it. Now is the time to be disobedient to darkness, which is obedience to light, is it not? You disobey what clings to you and claws onto you and tells you you have to endure that secret unhappy relationship. Who said so? Who said you had to endure anything that is unnatural? Misery is unnatural, period. Reality says you don't have to put up with unnaturalness any longer. It says you can be spiritually natural, poised, at ease, composed. When are you going to change your mind then? When are you going to choose something different? When are you going to rise up in rebellion? When are you going to stop taking it for granted that what is what has to persist? It doesn't. I am telling you it doesn't. And I am telling you that you're going to have to go 10,000 times deeper into your fear if you're going to break out of it. You won't go into it. You cover it up, you suppress it, you build it up. Instead of rising above it with that one part that you have that wants to understand, rising above it and seeing the opposites operating. You want to be suppressed one day and explode the next. Anyone who's suppressed and painful and confined one day and explodes the next wants that kind of a life, because he wants his life in preference to everlasting life.